Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a Future Ready Schools webinar. I am Carl Hooker, a faculty member for Future Ready Schools here from Austin, Texas. Future Ready Schools is a project of the Alliance for Excellent Education in Washington, D.C. And it's a collaboration between the Alliance and a vast coalition of over 60 other national and regional organizations. The goal for Future Ready Schools is to maximize digital learning opportunities and help school districts move quickly towards student-centered learning, which is something that's near and dear to my heart, of course. This effort provides districts with resources and support to ensure that local technology and digital learning plans align with instructional best practices, and that they're implemented by high-quality trainers, maximize learner-centered experiences for all students, particularly those from traditionally underserved communities. Future Ready Schools would like to thank our partner for today's webinar. This is AWS, Amazon Web Services. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, all of our wonderful sponsors that help us and as an organization kind of move forward and get our message of that learner-centered experience out there to the world. Speaking of getting things out to the world, and hi there to everyone checking in the chat. We have some folks joining us from Tennessee, from Massachusetts, from Los Angeles, a little bit of everywhere. Please be sure to stay connected, guys. These are all of our handles. So if you're on Twitter or Facebook, join the Future Ready Tech Leaders Facebook group, Future Ready Schools on Instagram, Future Ready Schools on YouTube. Don't have a TikTok channel yet. We'll work on that next. But if you'd like to go ahead and comment or share any of the resources from today, feel free to make sure you tag that at Future Ready hashtag as well. If you want to take a screen grab, things like that. It's gonna be a very interactive conversation. Not a lot of slides or anything like that to share, but if you're wanting to share something out, of course, always use the Future Ready hashtag on Twitter and Instagram. One other plug before we get rolling here. Join us, myself and Dr. Adam File, who you'll see in just a second, as we host 2 virtual workshops. These are an hour and a half, 90 minutes, quick hitting virtual workshops, all about the ever-changing cybersecurity landscape. We're going to talk about data privacy. We're going to talk about phishing scams, cybersecurity, cyber insurance. I mean, you name it, we're going to talk about it. We're going to try to bring in also experts from the field that you'll see from different areas, including state and local governments that'll be a part of this as well. So again, fun, interactive events, which you don't always get associated with cybersecurity, fun and interactive, but we're going to try to do our best to make it fun and interactive as always. And without further ado, thank you again for everyone checking in the chat there. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Adam, why don't you come on and tell the folks who you are and where you're from?
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am so ecstatic to be here. My name is Dr. Adam File. I am the Director of Technology and Media Services for the Newton County School District in Covington, Georgia, also known as the Hollywood of the South. Yes, you've heard it right. You heard it here. We are the Hollywood of the South. And I am extremely excited to be here and to share and to learn from this esteemed panel of speakers that we have. Because I see the next person up here is Wanda. And I just love being around her. I learned so much from her. But you know what, Carl, that's your job. I'm going to sit back and
just go ahead. You're used to it's a co-host thing. You're used to it. Wanda, come up. Yes, Wanda has presented actually with Adam and I at an event together one time or another. So and she survived. It was okay. No, Wanda is amazing. So Wanda, tell us who you are and where you're coming from.
I always hate following you two guys because you're so bold, and I'm like, hi, I'm Dr. Wanda Terrell. I am the Director of Technology for the Lakeland School System. We are just outside of Memphis, Tennessee. I was a teacher in the classroom before I moved to the ed tech side of things. I was a band director back in the day. Lakeland School System doesn't have a fancy name like Hollywood of the South. But we have 2 schools in our school district. Right now we're pre-K through 8. We're going to be adding high school grades starting next year. Run about 1,900 students and about 150 certified staff. But I am blessed to have 5 tech staff, 4 other than me, 2 tech support specialists and 2 instructional technology facilitators. So that's me.
That's important to know too as we get into this conversation, because and Adam, do you want to share real quick before we have Eric on what's the makeup of your district in terms of tech support and all of that?
Yeah, we have 20,000 students, 24 locations, and I have a total of 13 technicians to service those locations.
Okay. And last but certainly not least, we have with us Eric Butash. Eric, welcome. How are you, sir?
Carl, what's happening? Hey, everybody. Adam, great introduction. Wanda, nice to be on the board with you guys in the panel. I'm coming from the smallest state in the Union, Rhode Island. If you blink, you can drive through us. I say we're definitely the iPhone mini of when it comes to small states. I'll tell you, from Boston to Gloucester, it's crazy enough. We're 100 square miles, my school district here. We're a regional school. We make up almost 10% of the state of Rhode Island, but only represent 1% of the students in Rhode Island. We've got 1,300 kids in our school district. So you can understand that we've got a vast majority of space. We're the only rural school district in Rhode Island. We're also an XQ super school. For those who are familiar with XQ, we do a lot around the pathways for kids to get a kind of leg up out of the gate, knowing what they want to hone in on for their future. We are, just for technical purposes, our middle school is all Chromebook, our high schools are all Windows devices. So all of our kids in our high school have the same devices our students have. So we kind of don't marry the two together. The other thing is, before this, I was with Highlander Institute, for those folks with Highlander, and I've been about 13 years before that in different school districts. So I'm glad to be part of this panel. Assets are great things to talk about on a Tuesday afternoon, and how we manage them. So I'm glad to get going here. So
it's a rare person that says that assets are a good thing to talk about, but we are going to try our best, guys. No, this is good. I'm glad to have these three amazing panelists join us. They are all practitioners, folks. They're all from the K-12 space, different areas. You can hear different makeups in terms of devices, size, support, and all of that. So let's get right into it. And the other thing I'll add is, as we throw up this first question, those of you that, again, are participating in the chat, and thanks for those of you that have checked in, we welcome you to go ahead and answer these questions as well. It's always interesting to hear what our guests think, our attendees that are coming in. So question for our panelists, and we'll go right to Wanda with this first one. How did the pandemic change the way you track and manage your assets and technology? Because before it, obviously, there was always a challenge, but now we throw this layer of pandemic on it where maybe we can't get physically to some of these places. How did it change for you there, Wanda, in Lakeland?
Yeah, so I mean, even just from a system standpoint, we've changed some things. Part of it has been, as we know, we're getting ready to add high school grades. We had previously managed a lot of things with Google Sheets, just kind of hacking things together. We decided to add an actual formal system as we're continuing to grow, and I'll talk more about that in a bit when we talk about tools. When it comes to actually getting hands on the devices, last year about 20% of our kids were remote. So when they needed things fixed or devices swapped out, we do what we could through telephone and Google Voice, but there were times we had to do some physical swapping out of devices. But tracking of devices hasn't been a big issue for us since we already had the infrastructure in place.
And from talking to schools around the country, I found that tended to be a trend. And if you had something in place, I know a lot of schools just like kind of flew into one-to-one during this moment, but some had already had done some groundwork, which it sounds like you did there, Wanda, as well. Eric, what about you? Was there any changes you noticed there in Rhode Island with just the setup of everything? Because you're running one-to-one devices. You said two different types, your Chromebooks and Windows. And you're doing some other changes too. I mean, there's a lot more than just the devices that you're managing, but how did any of that change with the pandemic?
Yeah, I'll tell you that I think for our support, when you're a one-to-one, right? And so typically we would depot things. So you come in with a device that's broken. And so we take your device, a keyboard, screen, whatever, we put it on the bench to get fixed and give you a loaner device, right? And then swap it back out when that device is actually fixed. Well, that model had to change with the pandemic, right? So we had to figure out, well, that's not going to happen, right? So we started to figure out, we moved our model from that what we call depot style to more of a fleet model, right? So if you think about just take police, for instance, right? A police officer walks in, grabs a car that's on the road and takes it out for his usage on that time period. We treat all of our devices, when we buy our devices, they're all the same, so that when a kid comes down or something wrong with his device, we swap it with another device, right? And then we take that one there, refurb it back to original state so that device is ready for the next student that comes down. So that was one. The second thing is we made purchases for all of our devices we purchased. They come with 4-year accidental, meaning that if there's anything wrong with his devices for any reason, and also in-home on-prem repair. So no matter what, in the summertime, when we get these devices back, we're actually refurbing them back to original state. So the kids there used to be a thing with, this is my device for 4 years. Now it's changing that mentality of saying, this is the device I use for my schooling. And so we're flipping our devices so it's just as a fleet. Does that make sense? So that we're that there's no ownership to these devices anymore. So if it breaks, we'll get another one. So it's just that we keep going with our refurbished units.
And that's a difference that's something I've seen different since one-to-ones began. When I was doing mine in 2011, it was very much, here's your device, hold on to it the entire way through, and try to make sure nothing happens to it. And if something broke, it was like disaster. Now with the technology you're talking about, Eric, I mean, you could just, like you say, you just swap it out. It's going to rinse and repeat, put in a new device. The kid will notice really no difference, right?
Correct. That's exactly right. I mean, the thing that we're debating, I'm sure other on the call, is like the whole case thing, right? So cases, no cases, shell, no shell. So those are things that we're thinking about too. So, but nothing's
Awesome.
perfect.
And we got a photo bomb, our first photo bomb of a cat that is now officially a webinar. Thank you, Wanda. Adam, what about you? What things that you noticed that changed? And I noticed some people are already dropping some tools, and that's actually gonna be our next question here in a minute. But things that you saw change with the pandemic, specifically when it came to that kind of tracking and managing of assets.
Well, Carl, I think you know this about me. I'm going to share it with the group. I'm an asset man. And that was one thing that I told my team as soon as I got here. We have to make sure that we track our assets in our district. We're a Title I district by and large. 70% of our schools are Title I, so free reduced lunch. And a large portion of our technology had been purchased with title funding. So I know some of you in here may understand the deal with title, and you have to track things that has to stay at that particular site. So we were already doing a lot to track things. And one thing that I preach to my team is the Title I inventory shouldn't be cleaner than our inventory. The Title I inventory should come from our inventory. So our inventory in technology is the holy grail. It's the Bible, if you will, for technology. So it should come from that. So whether it's special ed, Title I, CTAE, whoever, if they need to pull some technology inventory, we should be able to give them that information. So it was one of those things, kind of like I think Eric mentioned it, setting those processes in place. So it wasn't necessarily a change. It was now a time to be like, okay, now I know what we have, because we weren't already one-to-one prior to the pandemic, but it was one of those where I needed to push out anything that wasn't bolted down. So having a clean inventory ahead of time let me know immediately how many Chromebooks I had at this particular site, what was the funding source, be able to push those things out as I needed. And, having it kept it pretty smooth. Notice I kind of hesitated on pretty smooth, and that kind of take us to the next question that you're going to ask us.
Right, which is that idea of, how are we doing all this? I mean, Wanda mentioned spreadsheets. I think Sandra mentioned in the chat too, spreadsheets. I mean, when we did it, when we did our one-to-one, we used a system that I won't name now because we didn't use them anymore, but it was iPads. And back then, if someone stole it, I mean, it was gone forever. And until Apple started doing the whole thing where you could actually tie it to your serial numbers. So it became a brick. But for the first couple of years, things were walking off and we were finding out about it. It'd end up in a different city, a different state. So tracking all of this, Eric, I'll go back to you. What are some tools? Let me queue up my next question here, actually, so you guys can all see it too. So that way the panel and also the guests can see this. What are some of those tools or strategies? Now, some of you have already started listing some, which is great in the chat, and we'll get to those too. When you talk about not only tracking, but also distribution and then collecting, or are you even doing that? And or what does that even look like anymore? Because back in my day, it was like, we would send them out the first couple of weeks of school, and then 2 weeks before school ended, we'd pick them up. And then we realized, man, they're losing, 4 or 5 weeks of instructional time while we do that. So we ended up just letting them keep the devices over the summer. And some schools do that and some schools don't. So I'm curious, what's your process for that, Eric? And then also the tools you use.
Yeah, so we actually, we collect all the devices at the end of the year. Obviously, we refurbish them as much as we can. Even the Chromebooks, we clean them up, get them ready, because it's a fleet model, right? So, and then we see them with Windows devices, we re-image them, getting prepared. But and it's already queued up. A lot of people, thank you. I think there's a bunch of people, and Karen from Norton, we use Instant IQ. We're coming on our second year of usage of this system, this platform. I think we're one of the first ones in Rhode Island to adopt the platform. And so it has such a great, it's our work order system, Carl, but it also tracks the assets as well. And so what the beauty behind the platform is that when we have issues or trouble tickets come up, our teachers, because it interfaces with a lot of platforms, it interfaces with our SIS, it interfaces with any platform. It has so many great interfaces. The one I think about is the fact that a teacher can pull up the kids in her class and do a quick work order that a machine's broken or one of the laptops is broken, and the kid doesn't have to fumble through a form. So there's a lot of pieces that it does. It does check-in, check-outs for us. It does sign off for acceptable use policy, so we know what devices I can troubleshoot what our heavy hitters are. So we have a platform that we use, and it's probably our number one easiest platform we have. I don't think it's probably my favorite application, to be honest with you, is tracking these assets and knowing my metrics for return on, like basically the return on tickets as it come in. How long is it taking us to repair things? What's our SLA? What's our number one issue on these devices? What's a trend we're starting to see? Is it screens breaking or keyboards breaking? So we use this to kind of track this piece. And honestly, it's a scan, check in, check out, right? And what I think, and I'll be completely honest in this call, what it's missing is, though, when you're checking in devices, there's a power cord that goes with it. There's no way of checking, say, he turned the device in or she turned the device in, but didn't turn a power cord in. Right. So we're struggling with that factor behind it, but those are things we're working on. But that's the platform we use, and we love it. It does all of our what we're doing. I think everyone is there's some love fest going on chat window or too. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point about the power cords, though. I mean, we were leaking power supplies and power bricks regularly every year. And what's interesting about this past couple of years is that folks that I've talked to that have been out there trying to get, I mean, even the back order to get new Chromebook power cords is been backlogged at some level. So I mean, losing those things walk off more than anything. So that's another part of it. It would be interesting to have that as part of your tagged asset tracking. Is that a field that you can check that says, yes, also return power cord or also return case, keyboard, whatever. Wanda, we'll go over to you on this. What are you doing? What's your magic sauce? First of all, are you collecting, distributing? Or are you letting them keep it? How is that working?
That very first summer, we let them keep it. This past summer, we collected. We've kind of waffled back and forth between, do they keep the device from year to year? Do they get a new device? We used to do, they keep their device, and then we switched to, they get a different device, and we found that there was more breakage and less proper care. Plus we wanted to, keep them from kind of getting exposed to anything from other devices. So we moved back to, this is your device. It's going to follow you from year to year. Take care of it. We are also big fans of Incident IQ. We just, that was the system we started using last spring, and this is our first full year with it. And just like Eric said, the connections that we can bring in, we can connect it to ClassLink, so we get the schedules. We can connect it to Google Workspace, so we bring in our Chromebook data. We can connect it to Mosel, so we bring in our teacher MacBook data. So Incident IQ gets a big thumbs up from us as well. We're using that now as a ticketing system, where we used to use Google Forms and kind of hack together stuff. We're very pleased with Incident IQ. You need to get them as a sponsor. There you go.
I know, right? Look at that. This has been an Incident IQ report. Well, I will say this, one thing we use, like I said, a couple different tracking systems during my day. And what we ended up doing with us here in Texas is we ended up just using our SIS, which was Skyward.
We use Skyward as well.
And we just added another field. So Wanda, like you're talking about when we were walking around the school, or Eric, I think you mentioned this too, a kid's device, something happens and we could pull it up right away. If we have the ID number, we could search it in the other field in Skyward. Now that costs money to add those fields on, like anything else. Whenever you do, product improvements, they don't usually give it to you for free. You have to pay the company and then they get to use it. But
I think our biggest point with Skyward is it's just not as user friendly.
Yeah.
IIQ is just so slick and it's just so easy to use. They have an app that makes those scanning really easy. And I get no kickback from IIQ for saying that.
It sounds like they met a need that was out there. They found it.
It's built for K-12. I mean, it's meant to be. It's great.
Yeah. And for companies out there that are listening to this, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, those of us that have to be in the space, and when you're talking rinse and repeat and repetitive tasks, like checking in things or looking for those, I mean, anything that can be done simpler, like having it, like you're saying, Wanda, with the phone, you just check it in with the phone, anything like that. I mean, we're always looking for that user friendliness, that UI UX experience. Adam, you and I have gone back and forth over the years. I know that we've talked a lot about distribution, collection. Do we do it or we don't do it? What are you guys doing currently? And then how are you tracking all of it?
Okay. Well, for me, and it was kind of interesting, since I weren't in the district, we weren't one-to-one at the start and we needed to send devices home. We actually were using an asset manager, and to your point, I'm the fan of, we oftentimes buy products and we use them the way that they've made it, but they don't necessarily make it the way we need it to work. And so there was not a solution to do asset managing the way I needed to do it at that time, because here was my dilemma. I'm sending home devices with I don't know who. You could come in and tell me, Carl, that you're here for your daughter.
Right.
I have to believe that and give that to you. And so what we needed at the time was an ability to scan or take a picture of a photo ID in addition to the signed form. And what we actually had at that time, we worked with the app developer, and we were able to export our asset data into a home-baked platform that then tied that to be able to take a picture of someone's photo ID or passport in some cases, some kind of identifying information, and attach that to that student. And that worked really well for us during that pandemic, because I needed a way to know who I was giving that to and to tie that guardian, parent, whoever to a kid. And so that really helped us keep track of, this is a responsible person for that device. So that was what we did during the pandemic. Now, we had already been looking at a long-term solution. So unlike a lot of people in the chat, we did not settle Incident IQ, which is pretty funny because they are based out of a town right next to mine. Oh. Like literally, like I baited them like several years back, but I ended up using the Hayes Frontline platform, their Get Help, and their TipWeb IT. So like everyone else, if you're on this chat, I do recommend getting an asset manager that ties into a help ticking system. If that all-in-one is your best bet if you have not decided on whatever you choose. But for this one, it worked really well for us. We were able to have, as everyone said, their forms. Students are able to digitally sign their forms on the device as they were checking them out. So that was there, able to email it to the parents. They have an app. So all those things that was mentioned earlier with Instant IQ, no matter what platform you choose, get that. And one thing that's big for me that some platforms don't do a good job of is being able to get that reporting data. So being able to, without printing out a report or figuring out the if-thens. If I want to know how many Chromebooks are checked out at Eastside High School, I should be able to, within a couple clicks, see it on my screen and not have to download a CSV file and then bring it into Excel to figure out that information. It should be a graphic. I could email that out to people on monthly reports. So look for all those features in whatever asset manager that you choose. That's my advice to anyone on here. And if anyone has any comments on that, I'll feel free to share.
Before we go to the next question, though, I want to do a follow-up because I actually think there's a couple of questions that have been brought up in the chat. So these will be quick hitters for all of our panelists. First question, what age do you let your students, or what grade level do students take their devices home? Because pre-pandemic, I don't know, but I mean, it was a big fight in our district. I fought to get fifth graders to take them home, and I was like, that's too young, which is funny now because my third grader is taking, their device home. So real quick, go around the horn there, start with Wanda. What age do your students take their devices home?
Full-time take home is 5 through 8. We don't have high school, but with the pandemic, if we have remote learners going to quarantine, elementary took them, but they didn't take them back and forth because they were home.
Right. Okay. Eric?
We're K through 12, basically take home. Kids can leave there in elementary school, can leave it in the classroom in the cart.
And was that the way before the pandemic? Before the pandemic too, or no? No,
it was carted before the pandemic. They were in carts at elementary school. We were full one-to-one for almost 10 years here. So from the early adopter, so for the middle school, high school, but the elementary schools were carted, and now it's like cart, but you can take it home with you too. It's your choice.
Okay.
As a student.
And
as young as kindergarten.
Yeah. Wow.
With us, we're doing, we started off 612 this school year, or last school year, this school year, going home. And for our grades 3, 4, and 5, we are in the process of starting that cycle to go home. Ultimately, for 3, 4, and 5, they had to go through their whole digital citizenship, loving and caring for your machine process before we started sending those home. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they'll be going home right before Thanksgiving.
We had our device driver's license that the kids had to earn. That was the same thing, similar process to get their device able to take it home. Okay, so the second quick follow-up question before we get to our bigger question about family and support, because I saw a couple of people mention this in the chat as well. somebody loses a charger or somebody, breaks something. What's your process? Some of you said you have kind of a warranty built in, or maybe some of you are doing insurance. I didn't really get into this into any of our upcoming questions, so I want to ask it here. How are you charging families? Are they paying some sort of rate? Eric, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, so we used to charge families $20 a year per kid for self-insurance to supply the parts bin. But since we went to an all-inclusive wraparound for our devices, meaning that it's being shouldered by a manufacturer, we did away with that. And we used to charge $20 for chargers, and we still are trying to figure that model. But what has really helped this year, Carl, is we put kits together in every classroom. So every teacher, every classroom has a bin of chargers, right? And they're wrapped with duct tape, or bright pink, or whatever color it would be. So they're loaner chargers. So for us, it has really cut down on the visits down to, hey, I need a charger, because there are plenty in the building, and there's a few charging stations at the library. Here's the other thing I'll also add is I actually upped the wattage on the chargers. So it actually increases the speed of charging. So within 20, 25 minutes, our devices are almost fully charged for the entire day. That makes sense.
Those rapid chargers would make a lot of sense. In fact, I've seen some schools shifting to the larger digital lockers even, that you can use as a temporary, although I like your idea of just pink duct tape. I think that works too, Eric. Hey, whatever it takes in school, right? We don't have the funds for these fancy lockers. Wanda, what about you?
We charge a Chromebook maintenance fee, but it's just a recommended fee. We don't require it. We do have some, any of our title students and homeless students, they don't have to pay that. We do have accidental damage. That's what as we've been purchasing a new set, we've been expanding that to help cover those costs. But for chargers, that if they lose it, they have to pay for a replacement. We don't let them buy the replacement because we want to make sure we get an on-brand standard, so that whoever gets that device next gets the real thing.
Yeah, I wanted to say that first or second year of the iPad one, you remember when all those different chargers are out there for iPads? Like we get the pink cords with the weird looking bricks, and I was like, what is going on here? We need the standard here. Adam, what about you? Or how are you charging, not charging, insurance? What?
This is recorded, right?
This is being recorded. Thank you for checking.
Here's my little thing, half second soapbox moment on this. That's always the first question that people ask, is like, how much are you going to charge the kids and stuff? And then I went back and asked them, how much are we charging the teachers? And then it was like silence. Okay, so we're not going to charge, we haven't been charging adults that actually have money, but we're going to charge kids with no money. Makes perfect sense to me, just like we suspend kids for not coming to school. So my logic was, hey, everybody ultimately gets a freebie. If it's an accidental damage, things happen, especially there in the house, multiple kids, all this stuff. So we've kind of looked at it. And as Eric said, we decided to get our extended support and all that. So we give the kids a freebie. Only time that we go out and charge the kids, if we can show that it was malicious. So if it's snapped in half, that's not an accident. If the screen has been stabbed, that's not an accident. If it was left on top of the stove, I'm pretty sure that wasn't an accident.
Wow.
All these things have happened. So these are things, so I'm just trying to be logical about it, because as I mentioned earlier, we have 75%, whatever, free reduced lunch. So for these people, they may not have the resources, especially when you start talking about multiple kids being in school. And now, while we may say, oh, it's only $20, $30, whatever, if you have 6 kids, that's a lot of money that you're talking about having to pay. And we don't want to make that a hindrance from students learning. And it's going back, and it may be something that we cover later. I've been open and honest with my board and let them understand this is the cost of doing business. Yeah. So if you choose to go one-to-one, you have to have it in your funds to be able to replace 15% of your chargers, 10% of your devices, worst case scenario. Going into this, you need to understand this is the cost of playing this game. If you can't do that, then you don't need to go one-to-one. So those are just some conversations that I've tried to have over the years with my school board and my supervisors, my superintendent, so they have a clear understanding that this isn't just a freebie.
Well, and then you just set off a series, I'm sure, of what will happen in the chat now is of all the different ways that people have heard devices getting ruined. As Justin mentions, what if it goes to the washing machine? My favorite was the laptop from the teacher that had sand in the laptop. And I was like, why is there sand in here? Well, I took it to the beach. So that funding question, Adam, it gets us to, I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit because I think this is important too, because I think you just touched on, we just talked a lot about tracking all of these things and all of these different loose ends that we're trying to manage and keep track of. And we know that there's a a lot of funds coming our way, or they may have already arrived in your schools. Now, tech leaders, you may not have a seat at the table when these funds are getting distributed. Hopefully you do. But when it comes to making these technology purchases, we know that they have a very short shelf life when it comes to also the funds, because 2024 is going to be here before we know it. And by the way, most schools will have spent all of their ESSER funds before then. So how do we make that case that Adam just mentioned? How do you make that case and make sure that technology is a sustainable part of the budget in your school when you're long gone out of the district? I mean, how do you make it so that they realize it's not just because you're the one harping on it? They need to see that it has that kind of value. Wanda, you want to take this one to start?
Yeah, so with the only ESSER funds that we used to purchase technology was that very first batch. And honestly, we had funds already budgeted, but because the ESSER money came in, we were able to basically make more use of the money. So where we had funds set up for refreshing the devices at our one-to-one middle school, we didn't have enough devices at the elementary to be one-to-one, even though they weren't take home. So we used that money to beef up the inventory at the elementary so that we could have one-to-one. That was to get us through the pandemic. I don't know that we will stay one-to-one at the elementary as the pandemic wanes. But we are blessed with tremendous parental PTO support. They do a lot of fundraisers to help with the technology needs at the elementary school. But we do have budgeted refresh funds, okay. Not as well structured as we would like, especially when it comes to staff devices. We tend to really plan for the refresh for these student devices because they're so tied into the curriculum. We just kind of keep our fingers crossed sometimes with staff that they will take better care of the devices. It's not always the way it is, but
yes. I think we even had a one-time whoops, kind of chart, if it was accidental, even like Adam was saying, a couple of times. I mean, I think you can kind of get away with that, but it's about the third time in a year that a staff has broken their device, you're starting to worry that there may be some negligence there. I mean, even if it's, I accidentally spilled Coca-Cola on it or my coffee, and then the next time it's the sand at the beach, and the next time you're like, all right, this is
we do self-insurance for teachers. They kind of pay a little fee at the beginning of the school year, but if it's negligence, they're going to pay for the repair. Yeah, okay. It only takes one of those to get them in the right place.
Yeah, once they see it happen once, like, oh, this really does happen, we better take care of these, right? Yeah, and it's tricky because we've made it so ingrained into their instructional and learning practices that at the same time we don't want to take it away from them or punish them. So you have to figure out a way to make it all work. But just like anything else, if something's ruined or destroyed purposely, then there needs to be a consequence. Eric, what about you when you're looking at long-term sustainability? What is your plan? How do you communicate that, I guess, to the community, but also your board and the stakeholders there?
Yeah, so I think one thing we're looking at doing is going to a 4-year warranty on it, accidental warranty, to stretch it out a little bit, right? So out of the gate, that's what we're looking to. 2 is I'm actually working on this budget year is actually doing a cost per student technology. What is the cost per student for technology that includes the hardware, the software, because everything's becoming subscription based. But what I want to do is make an impact to my school board saying, this is just as important as keeping the lights on, right? So if we pay the electricity bill, this bill includes this, and this, right? So I just want to build that as not separate, but as a bundled fee. So for me, getting that mindset around the fact that this is what it costs to do business today. Our systems this is what runs our school system right now. It's for technology. And I think the piece for me is that we also are cycling back. Most people get a device and use that device straight up through your senior year. And so the thought process here is we get a device, we get new devices for our juniors and seniors. So, because they're getting the thick of their educational career. So why don't they get the latest and greatest technology? So they're getting the newest chipsets. while we're recycling back some of the stuff for a freshman year, right? And so some of the newer stuff is coming. So for me, the cycle doesn't go, here's your device that you got on your 4th year when you need to produce some high-end quality work. You're now struggling with 4-year-old technology. Where, does that make sense? So I'm cycling back and giving the best to my junior senior, which is kind of an opposite model that most people are not used to. So and I guess the other piece is for me is I'm acquiring purchase of technology that is not educational models. So I'm buying from a manufacturer that's not this educational SKU. I'm buying business model machines that our teachers use for teaching machines for our students as well. And treating it as such as saying, like, listen, these are devices you're going to see on the marketplace, not 11-inch screen, not like 4 gigs of memory. Like, I'm buying assets that look and feel like you would get for your college career and or in a job. If that makes any sense.
Wow.
So,
yeah, that comes with the price tag, but I love the vision there too, because that is right. People are always saying, well, we need to be more like colleges. We need to be more like college. First of all, there's a whole lot that school needs to change to make it look like college besides the device. But if you have some say in it and you can give them that higher end machine that comes with all the bells and whistles that they'll need, that's a great way to get them kind of set up for success.
Yeah.
Adam, what about you in terms of this idea, sustainability? How are you pitching this? I mean, I know you've gone through permutation, like you said, you've expanded your one-to-one as a result of the pandemic. So now all the funds are there. In a couple of years, you're gonna come asking for more, and they're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? I thought it was only a one-time deal.
See, well, I'm going to start off telling you about my fail. So years ago, first time I did this, because this is my second time doing a one-to-one. I did one in Kansas City with iPads. First thing that I did when I had the budget and rolled it out, and I did a multi-year plan. I kind of wanted to mention it, and I only was worried about student devices. So when I did this 5-year plan, it was only student devices. I didn't factor in teacher devices. I didn't factor in classroom technology. All these other components that were needed, I did not include all that. So it was like, duh, lesson learned. So I encourage everyone, as you're putting together this plan, I think Holly mentioned it in her comment in the chat, I have a 5-year plan, but it's not just the student devices. It's everything, so people don't get sticker shock. So it's like, hey, here's what it's going to cost for the student devices. Here's what it's going to cost to replace our teacher devices. Any classroom technology equipment, where you're talking about interactive panels, any of your E-rate stuff that you're going to have to pay a portion of. So they understand the total cost. I said it earlier, the total cost of doing business. So yes, the student devices is a piece of it, but if I'm asking for technology money for devices, all this stuff goes together. So they understand it's all part of this thing that we're doing, this whole one-to-one, this whole teaching and learning. And Eric, you mentioned it, it's like the light bill. Once we decided we like having lights, you're going to have lights forever. Once you get a taste of central heating and air, you're like, this ain't half bad. We got to keep this. So that's how I'm kind of picturing this whole thing where devices and one-to-one, we should like this, and this should be how we do business here on out.
And I see a lot of people in the chat also mentioning different versions. There's leasing, there's some that are, I like a lot of comments about Eric, kind of folding in that software and tech costs. I once ran a report for my board that was technology we supported in 2001 to technology we supported in 2000, and I think it was 17 at the time. Yeah. Projectors, printers, copiers. I mean, when you start adding everything else, and I think the amount of technicians we had stayed constant, but the amount, I think it was somewhere around 4,000 to 4,000, I think, devices per technician, which was just insane. And then with instructional tech, it was even less, and we had less of those folks. So it was like one person per every 8,000 devices that they had to go in and actually train and support people on. So there's that part of that budget cycle that I think we need to fold in too, not just the software and the hardware, but also how do we upkeep all that? How do we keep all this running? Because otherwise it becomes really expensive bricks that are hiding in closets in our schools.
Hey, Carl, if I could add into that, and one piece, and this is tying back to that asset manager and ticketing, utilizing your asset manager to project out your refreshment cycle is very important. And also, if you have that asset manager tied to your ticketing, it can also make your cases when someone is like, oh no, those Chromebooks or those devices can last 5 years. Well, if you can pull those reports and say, hey, in year 4 and 5, we're having to repair these devices, so 4 and 5 times a month to keep these devices going, and then you are factoring in, okay, the man hours and all this kind of stuff, it could make your point to say, hey, we need to replace them in 4 years instead of 5 years. So, you having that data at hand can help make your case for you when you're trying to go on a 4-year refreshment, or when you're trying to get additional staff and saying, hey, if you're not going to let me buy more devices, I at least need another person, because in year 4 and 5, we're having a whole lot of repairs and I don't have the people to do that. So, have your data make your case for you.
Let me do a quick follow-up before we get to the next question. Oh, Eric, go ahead. What were you going to say? And then
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing to Adam's things too. That I actually use a product called Catch On that actually reports back the utilization of those devices, which is useful. And I share those reports with building leadership as well as school boards in my budget, so they have an idea like these are being used. They're not bricks, so you can see what's being used, what's the top 20 apps and stuff like that.
That's huge. That's huge data that I think in the past we didn't have access to as much, because we had to go and actually hit every single company to try to get those usage reports. But now if you have a tool like Catch On, or there's other tools out there too that do that, where they kind of collect some of that, man, what a powerful tool to have in your back pocket when you go to those board meetings. Real quick follow-up before we get to these last couple of questions. Kids buying the devices after they're done. Possible, not possible? I know that was a big thing in our district too. Like at the end, I know Eric mentioned the end of life. So it's like, I had these seniors that had a 4-year-old iPad, but and this is iPad 2s back then, even the first go around, and they were like, we want them for college. And I was like, but they're 5 years old, but still they wanted to keep them. So do you allow it? Can you allow it? Wanda, do you want to start with that?
We don't have that functionality right now. And I think a lot of it is because a lot of what we purchase is with federal funds. And so that really limits what we can do with it and when we can let it go. So no, we don't.
No, you don't. Okay. Yeah. Same with us. Ours was bond dollars, and it had to be end of useful life before we could technically sell it back. Adam.
Yeah, same thing. It does. It's a board policy. What we will do, we have a program that it's kind of weird, where I shouldn't say weird. It's different, where it's devices for ed. So once they are surplus out of our use, then we can sell those, but you won't be guaranteed to get your device. So let's just say, we pull a group of 1,000 devices, we'll go through them and say 500 of them are serviceable again for someone. We will wipe them, put whatever the OS that they came in on, and then it's like a pool, and you can put in your bid to buy one of those devices. This is really a low-cost machine for a household, so a family can go in there and spend $20 and they get a laptop. But once again, it's not necessarily Adam's laptop that he had for 4 years. It's just one of the 500 that we have available that year as part of our board policy.
Yep. We did a similar thing. In fact, we actually had a company that bought all the leftover ones that no one else wanted for a big lump sum that we were able to use to put toward new cases and things like that for that sustainability approach. Eric, how about you?
I think to win out of my sale there, Carl, I think that's the thing we're investigating, is the fact of someone else reclaiming this property at the end of the life and giving us some type of credit to use in certain things. We wanted to go on this path. We ran into some issues with software, the software requirements and who's transferring software, and you can't include certain software. You can, so they became a little challenging. And then are you gonna spend time and effort re-imaging these machines to hand out? So it just didn't know if it made the end justify the means at that point in time. So who knows what 4 years is going to hold? I mean, I think there's been a lot of transformation with chipsets and technology that maybe 4 years, these assets may be a little bit more than looking at a Celeron chip in the face. Does that make sense? So
Right.
What we were years ago. So who knows? It'd be nice to see in the future. But for right now, I think we're going to reclaim some type of credit and sell it to some company that will give some for other purchases.
And then you just hit me off with another trigger question. This is a quick one. And this one, the chat people can answer this one too really quick. When you buy a device, what is your expectation of useful life? How many years? Go around real quick. Wanda?
4 to 6.
4 to 6. Adam saying 4.
I go 4.5 because they're going to be loaner machines for that 5th year.
Oh yeah, we don't throw them away if they're useful. They will be loaners, definitely.
But they won't be full-time. They won't be full-time devices.
Right.
Yeah. Like with that, Eric, like that half year, that's normally what we will give to the paraprofessionals or
subs,
folks like that. Yeah, subs. It's like, hey, here you go.
Yep. Well, we've actually reached our 45 minutes really fast, guys. So I have one more. We'll do this as an ending question because I think this is important too. We didn't really get into the community part of this yet. So our ending question will be this one. And then those of you in the chat, if you have a question for our panelists, we try to wrap up right around now, but we'll have time for just a couple quick questions. If you guys have them in the chat, we've been kind of interacting with you throughout this. But Kind of a final question here. We talked a little bit about board. We've talked a lot about, working with the families in terms of those replacements, in terms of tracking, in terms of bringing all these devices in and distributing them. This is a larger question though. This is the importance of community partnerships. That could be anything. That could not just be families. It could be businesses. It could be other things like that. So how important is that, first of all? And then how do you start to create that in your communities? I know all three of you come from very different communities. How do you reach out? What does that outreach look like in your area? Wanda, we'll start with you.
It's something that's got to be every day, all the time. It can't be, please help us now, we need help. I think, constantly reaching out to your local chamber of commerce and being involved in that. I think the school districts in just about any schools in any community, they're really the heart of what's going on. They impact the real estate, they impact the businesses that are coming in. We ask for a lot. It's important that we give a lot to the community as well. And so I think that's part of the relationship.
Yeah, I always thought if you're asking for money just when the bond election is happening, it's too late. You have to always have that idea of like, this is an important part of our cycle. It's not just because we're asking for bond money. We need to always have that kind of continued conversation. That's a great point, Wanda. Eric, what about you?
Well, I could say that it's something we're working on here because we have a large footprint, right? Size-wise, 100 square miles for us. But the piece for me is like two things. One is during the pandemic, we installed wireless in different locations around the school, around the county, in 2 different towns. Wow. So folks, because we have some folks that use dial-up or use satellite internet access. So we opened up some guest hotspots in areas. So we put APs on the outside of our buildings for people to come in and use our space, to use our internet access, because they may not have broadband, but maybe you need to download something, or we offer this ability for them to go to different locations around the 2 towns to get access. But the second piece about it is the community piece is that there are some people in our community that work for some of the companies that we work for and are able to offer some advice or some kind of like, hey, just come down the road, or just that like person you need to lean on if you have any problems with a product or software package. They're here in our communities. They know ed tech, and so having that bridge too always it helps us as well as a district to kind of jockey around. So for us, it's challenging because we got size and mileage, and not everyone has we're one of the few communities that don't have broadband everywhere. So like that's a real struggle, right? And so that device is being sent home with a kid may be the only device that entire family has, right? And so, or a hotspot we send with it. So for us, the community piece is just give them the access, letting them know that hey, this school, the doors are closed, but the outside you have access to some of the services we provide. Does that make sense?
Yep. So I like that, extending those services out there. I will say the community part is definitely a double-edged sword too, because we have Dell and Apple in our backyard here in Austin, and when you go with one device over another, there could be some political things that's a whole nother webinar. And we talk about managing the politics of screen time and what devices you buy. Adam, what about you building those community partnerships? I know you guys have done a lot of work there in Newton County.
One of the things we went ahead and when we got all our devices, as part of the whole asset management, had everything etched. I strongly encourage, if you purchase devices, get those etched with your district information on there, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff. And so as we started going into our community, let them know that we had these devices, we let them know what our devices look like. Hey, they're going to have the district logo on it. Hey, you're going to see this phone number. And we went to our churches because once again, going to those places where students could gather, where we know there's internet access or support, or where they may find one of these devices laying around. So churches, we've talked to we're partners with our local libraries, our large apartment complexes. If they have those guest centers. So as Eric mentioned, we had the ability to provide internet access through state grants. We had these Wi-Fi rangers that we could put on buildings. And so if we found an apartment complex that didn't have internet access in that area, we say, hey, you might as well, we put one here. So boys and girls club. And it goes to that whole thing of telling your story before someone else can. Because to your point, Carl, you're going to have somebody who's going to complain about screen time, or that one kid who looks up a dirty picture and doesn't quite get dirty, but it's a picture. And the parents said, oh, they did this on the school device, or a kid who loads something on the flash drive and puts it up on the machine. So those stories will happen. And you have to have all that positivity that's happening with these devices out there first. So that's the big story that everybody sees and hears, not those one or two bad situations that happen. So when it's time for a bond, we call it eSPLOS here. That penny, we have a 1 penny sales tax that goes toward educational projects in our county. When those things come up, we want the positivity, the Flipgrids the kids have created. We want the content, the apps and games and esports. We want those to be the one-to-one stories that are told. And if you put that out there in your community and that's what they're singing, your praises, when it's time for your next bond referendum or to get those funds to sustain this, you're not going to have a problem because they're going to see the great things that their students are doing in the community. So that's my words of wisdom on that one.
It was Eric Schnediger who said, if you don't tell your story, someone else will, right? So I think that's important. And I think that's another one of the many things that we wear now as tech leaders. Another hat to put on is that of storyteller, because you need to make sure if it's not you, someone in your department is going out there and sharing those stories. Well, I want to thank Adam, Wanda, and Eric. You guys have been great. This has been a high, fast-paced panel. I looked up and we're like, wow, we're already at 45 minutes. So we could go on forever. Who would have thought, guys, that assets would be such an exciting, well, I know Adam would have thought that, but yeah.
I love them.
No. Speaking of Adam and myself, make sure you guys have a chance to, I'm going to put this in the chat as well, but when you can, there is a cybersecurity. We are doing a 2-part, and actually they're 2 separate things. If you missed the first one, you can go to the second one on November 9th and 16th. They're both on Tuesdays from 12 to 1:30, little 90-minute sessions on cybersecurity. We're going to bring in some experts from the field. We're going to talk to the practitioners out there about what's happening in the cybersecurity space, which is always changing. Who knows? We may even talk about blockchain, NFTs. You never know. I mean, everything's different these days. Also, if you get a chance to, be sure to subscribe to the Undisrupted podcast, a podcast for tech leaders by tech leaders. Yay. Thank you. We have a couple of our guests on here right now. 3 of our guests, Sandra now with a thumbs up as well, jumping in. Thank you guys. We have season 4 now streaming, where we'll be talking a lot about sustainability, some of the things we talked about in this very webinar today. And with that, we want to thank again our sponsors, AWS and Future Ready Schools, and all of our panelists. Be sure to check out futureready.org. This will be recorded and is going to be dropped onto the futureready.org website soon in the next couple of days. So if you missed it, you're probably watching this on a recording right now. And of course, be sure to follow Future Ready at Future Ready on the Twitter and the hashtag Future Ready. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day.